Hi, this is Sue Jackson, and I'm here today with something special. This is my favorite books of the year in fiction and nonfiction for the last 16 years. I thought of doing this the other day when I realized I've had my blog for 18 years. And around the second year that I had it, I began keeping track of and writing a post about what my favorites were for the year. And so I thought it would be fun to look back at those. And as I looked back through these posts on my blog, it was really interesting because some of the books that were my favorites more than a decade ago, you've heard me talk about on my blog because they are still my favorites. Other books I had completely forgotten about. There were a couple where I had to click on the link and go read my own review just to find out what it was about. So there are a lot of books here. I'm going to try to go through them relatively quickly. So let's get started. So way back in 2009, I wrote on my blog that my favorite book of the year was People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks. She has since become one of my favorite authors. My introduction to her was reading March, which was one of my neighborhood book group picks. And this was the book that made me realize that I do like historical fiction. I hated history in school, so I didn't think I liked historical fiction. My book group read March, and that changed my mind completely. So Geraldine Brooks was the author, and People of the Book was the chosen book for our All County Reads book that year in 2009. So I not only read the book and loved it, but I also got to meet her and hear her speak. She was very entertaining. My favorite nonfiction book read that year was Gumbo Tales. Finding My Place at the New Orleans Table by Sarah Rohan. I loved this book so much. And my blog review actually caught her attention. It caught the attention of her husband, who forwarded it to her. And we ended up corresponding. As many of you know, I used to live in New Orleans. That's where my husband and I met. It holds a special place in our heart. And this memoir of hers is all about the food of New Orleans. It's kind of a memoir. It's kind of just straight nonfiction. She writes about the history of the foods, the best places to eat them. I had so many notes when I finished this book of restaurants that we wanted to try. Loved it. She and I had a great email conversation going for a while. This is still a book that I very often recommend. In 2010, I said that my favorite book of the year was Mudbound by Hilary Jordan. Interestingly, I reread this a few years after that for a book group. Loved it both times. Oh, I know, I reread it because it was another pick for our All County Reads book. More recently, actually. But this first time I read it for a book group, absolutely loved it. It's a beautifully written historical novel about a small town in Mississippi, I think, just after World War II. And the black sharecroppers, one of whom had served in the war and came home to find the treatment was terrible. This was during Jim Crow. Fabulous book. I still have not seen the movie adaptation, so I need to do that. My favorite nonfiction book that year in 2010 was one I had completely forgotten about, The Soloist by Steve Lopez. So I had to go back and remind myself what it was about. It was about a reporter for the LA Times, is that the name of it? Who heard a homeless man on the street playing beautiful music. I think he played bass, not bass guitar, but the stand-up bass. And the friendship that formed between these two men as the journalist encouraged him and helped him with his music. A beautiful, beautiful story. And yeah, I'm glad I was reminded of it. I had forgotten all about it. In 2011, my favorite book of the year was The Story of Beautiful Girl by Rachel Simon. Rachel is a local author that I invited to our book group when we discussed this. Most people know her from the first book she wrote, a memoir called Riding the Bus with My Sister, which was about her attempting to better understand her mentally disabled sister by joining her in her obsession, which was riding the buses in her hometown, in her home city. And so Rachel joins her. So that was the memoir that made her famous. This was her first novel, and it is beautiful. It is a wonderful story. It also features a main character with a developmental disability who is locked in a horrible mental health facility in 1968. Anyway, this is a beautifully written, very uplifting novel. My whole book group loved it. My number one pick for nonfiction that year was Always Looking Up, Adventures of an Incurable Optimist by Michael J. Fox. He appears twice on this list. If you've never read one of his memoirs, I highly recommend listening to them on audio. That's what I always do. He reads them himself. I don't know if he's still reading his latest one, but he read the earlier ones, including this one. Yes, they are funny, as you might expect from him, but they are also heartwarming, moving. Every one of them brings me to tears, makes me laugh out loud, and this is one of my favorites. In 2012, I was so torn in deciding on my top fiction read of the year that I cheated. I separated it into favorite fiction from a new author and favorite fiction from an old favorite author. So the new author was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, that fun science fiction novel. It's dystopian. It's about a future world where almost everyone lives in the virtual world, and how a kid from poverty sets out to win this grand prize that this tech billionaire is offering. It is so much fun if you've never read it. If you grew up in the 70s and 80s, it is filled with so many fun pop culture references. I loved it. My husband read it and he loved it. We gave it to our younger son and he loved it. It's just a great book. And the movie they made out of it was actually excellent. My favorite novel by an old favorite author that year was 11/22/63 by Stephen King. You know how I feel about time travel books, but this one is especially spectacular. It's basically, and if you're not into science fiction, it's basically historical fiction about a man who discovers a rift that he can walk through, go back to 1961, I think, and he decides to use that to try to stop the assassination of JFK. It is a fabulous book. My mother's husband, who rarely reads fiction, I buy him nonfiction every year for Christmas and his birthday, he loved this book. It is just so, so, so good. My favorite Stephen King, by the way. And it's not horror, if you think Stephen King only writes horror. It's historical fiction with a tiny bit of time travel. My favorite nonfiction that year was a memoir, The Life and Times of the Thunderbolt Kid by Bill Bryson. This was a really fun, Bill Bryson's always fun, but my husband and I both especially enjoyed this one because it's about his childhood. So it is filled with nostalgia. Now, he's more my husband's age than mine, but we could both relate to a lot of what he was writing about. And he grew up in the Midwest in Iowa. My husband's from Oklahoma, about the same time frame. He really loved it, but I really enjoyed it too. Funny, of course, as he always is, filled with interesting facts, as he always does, and also, very warm and full of heart. All right, 2013. So this book came out of nowhere for me. My favorite book of the year was The Orphan Master's Son by Adam Johnson. I'd never heard of the author before. He won the Pulitzer Prize that year for that book. And so, on a whim, I had much fewer TBR books back then. I went to the library. There was no wait list. Nobody even knew about this book yet. The Pulitzers had just been announced. I went and got it out of the library. I was blown away. It's about North Korea. It is set in North Korea. So it is fascinating. It's gripping. But it is also hilariously funny. And you know how much I like a sense of humor in a book. Absolutely loved it. And I just heard that Adam Johnson has a new book either out now or coming out soon. And I will definitely be reading that. I was just so impressed by this book. That one has definitely stuck with me over the years. For nonfiction, I chose I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. Everybody knows this is just such a beautifully written memoir. It is heartbreaking, heartwarming, and her writing is just gorgeous. I've been meaning to read the rest of her memoirs. When was this? 2013? I haven't yet, but I will, I promise. 2014, I didn't choose favorites. I'm guessing I ran out of time. Most of my favorites of the year were posted on my blog, like in late January. I was always behind. So that year, I just put a top 10. Top 10 fiction, and I think top 10 adult books and top 10 children's YA books. Just kind of, boom, that was it. So what I did today was just looked at that list. There was only one nonfiction on it, so that part was easy. Of the fiction, I just chose the one that, looking back, I still remember best and had a huge impact on me. Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Carol Rivka Brunt. This was read for my neighborhood book group, and we all loved it. I think, I should have reread my review. I think it's set in the 80s in Europe. I know it deals with the AIDS crisis, but also with family. It was just a beautifully written novel. We were all very moved by it. We had a great discussion from it. If you haven't read it yet, it's a great book group book. And my nonfiction book of the year in 2014 was the only nonfiction on my top 10 list, Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Another one that most people know about. It's her memoir of walking the Pacific Crest Trail with zero experience in hiking, zero preparation. Just horrifying, actually, for somebody who used to backpack. But, a brilliant story. An outdoor adventure story, but also a deeply emotional memoir of what this hike did for her emotionally and how she grew from it. She was grieving at the time, which is why she just set out with no forethought. Wonderful, wonderful book, both about hiking, but also about grief and emotion and growth. In 2015, I picked Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. Still a favorite. I often mention this book on my channel. As you know, if you've watched me before, I love books that play with time, and this one does that so well. It's about a woman who keeps reliving her life. She keeps dying and starting back at birth. Fascinating book. What she eventually decides to do with these many lives is equally fascinating. So historical fiction as well as this intriguing concept with time. Still outstanding. I definitely want to reread this someday because I loved it so much. My top nonfiction pick in 2015 was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. This is her graphic memoir of her childhood, growing up with her two siblings in a funeral home. Their parents ran a funeral home. It is moving. It is hilarious. And then maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more than that, my concept of time is like so warped these days. I actually saw the play adaptation of the book, which was outstanding. It was just a local production put on by our local theater company, but and friends took us to it because someone they knew was in it. Really outstanding. If you've never read it, it's just a great memoir. In 2016, my favorite novel of the year was Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. I vividly remember reading this in South Dakota on our vacation that year in August. I love when a book brings back memories of the time and place where I read it. I just loved this book. It's these different stories set in different periods of time that have small, trivial ways that they connect. But it's all about, the novel is all about connections. And so you get really absorbed in one story, and then it moves to the next story, but it comes back to most of them. The futuristic one, I think they only hit on once. The others, they all come back to. And I just thought it was brilliant and so clever, the way these stories connected. And I love a novel about connection. My favorite nonfiction in 2016 is another one that's really stuck with me. Behind the Beautiful Forevers by Catherine Boo. Life, Death, and Hope in a Mumbai Undercity. This also won the Pulitzer for nonfiction. Catherine writes so beautifully about the people living in these Mumbai slums, which are really just little shacks with no running water, no sanitation. It is such a moving story. This was maybe my first introduction to nonfiction that read for me like a gripping novel. I couldn't put it down. Narrative nonfiction. I was just so impressed by it. The book group I read it for, we all loved it. I told my husband he would love it too, but it's been sitting on his side of the TBR bookcase since 2016. 2017 was a blast from the past. My favorite fiction of the year was The Atlas of Forgotten Places by Jenny D. Williams. I remembered nothing about this book. I had no idea what it was about. I literally did not remember reading it. So I clicked the link. Turns out it was one of the books that I reviewed for Shelf Awareness when I was writing for them. And once I read my review, which was excellent, by the way, I remembered my experience of reading the book. It's set in Uganda, about two different women who are each looking for missing family or friends. They might both be family members. One of them is a Ugandan young woman, who at the age of like 12 was kidnapped by Ugandan rebels, made to live in the forest and become a rebel. We've heard about these child soldiers. And she had recently returned to her home village, only to find that someone was missing. Maybe her brother. I just reread my review. That's all I know about it. And the other woman is a young white woman from Germany whose sister has gone missing in Uganda. She was there for an aid project. And the woman herself, who's older, used to work on aid projects in Uganda, so she's a little familiar with the area. So these two women go together into the jungle with a guide for protection in search of their missing family members. Now that I remember what it was about, I do remember loving this book. Just really immersive, powerful fiction that helped me learn about a place I didn't know much about. My favorite nonfiction in 2017, I listened to on audio, Anne Frank Remembered by Miep Gies with Allison Leslie Gold. So Miep Gies was one of the people that helped hide the Frank family during the war. And so this was her memoir, her memories of what went on from her perspective, one of the people helping to hide their family and other families as well. Really moving, powerful book, excellent on audio. And I think she was probably the last of the people that helped to hide them. This is a great chance to listen to a piece of history or read a piece of history firsthand from someone who was there. In 2018, my favorite fiction of the year was The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. Oh, this is such a good book. It is science fiction about going to a different planet and meeting new intelligent species, about humans meeting and interacting with these species we've never seen before. It is outstanding, a gripping narrative, very propulsive, kind of mind-blowing. It's just so, and eye-opening. It's kind of dark in places. There's also some humor in it. It's just an outstanding novel. I've got the sequel to it, The Children of God, I think, upstairs on my TBR shelf. I need to get to it. My favorite nonfiction in 2019 was Look Alive Out There by Sloane Crosley. This was another one I had to look up. I did not remember. Even the cover didn't look familiar to me. The author has written several collections of essays, which is what this is. Her first one is really well known. Now I've lost the name. I'll write it up here. But so this was a collection of essays. I found her writing to be very both moving and heartwarming as well as very funny. She's one of those essayists who she can write about ordinary daily events, but in a way that is so interesting and hilarious. So I really enjoyed that now that I remember it. My favorite novel in 2019 was one you've heard me talk about many times if you've been to my channel before, Hum If You Don't Know the Words by Bianca Murray. Oh, well, there might be some people who haven't heard this already, but this is still one of my all-time favorite novels. It's set in South Africa in the 1980s during apartheid. It's about an orphaned white girl, I think she's 9 at the beginning, named Robin, and the black woman named Beauty, who is hired by her aunt to help care for her because her aunt is a flight attendant and travels a lot. And the relationship that forms between the two of them. Gripping story. There's a bit of a mystery in there because Beauty's in the city looking for her own daughter. Fascinating historical detail. It's historical fiction, but also hilariously funny. Particularly Robin's perspective on the adult world and her trying to understand what's going on around her. Just belly laugh funny. One of my favorite books. Still. My favorite nonfiction that year was one that has stuck with me as well. The Devil's Highway by Luis Alberto Urrea. This is about immigration. It is the true story of a group of immigrants who crossed our southern border. They were fleeing violence in their own countries. They were desperate to come to America. Obviously, I read it in 2019, and it was written before that. It may have, I think it won an award as well. I'll put that up here. And I listened to it on audio. Such a powerful, moving eye-opening story. Probably something that everyone in America should read. And that was the year I started choosing both a favorite nonfiction and a favorite memoir because I was reading more nonfiction by then and often I couldn't pick. The more categories I have, the easier it is for me to pick. So my favorite memoir that year was Becoming by Michelle Obama, which I also listened to on audio. I ended up listening to it again for a book group a few years later. Absolutely love that one. In 2020, my favorite novel of the year was Dear Edward by Ann Napolitano. I read it right at the end of the year in December. And this is why I don't like when I see best of the year lists coming out in November or even early December. Your best book of the year could still be ahead. And that was the case for me that year. Loved that book. My husband and I, he didn't read the novel, but we both watched the TV adaptation, which split the story into two parts, and I don't think they've ever followed up with the second part. So didn't love that, but otherwise the adaptation was pretty good. But the novel is outstanding. About a plane crash with a sole survivor, a little boy, and the letters that people write to him. So this was another year I picked both a nonfiction favorite and a memoir favorite. And I decided to tell you about both of them because they're both outstanding. The nonfiction favorite was The Feather Thief, Beauty, Obsession, and the Natural History Heist of the Century by Kirk Wallace Johnson. I read this for a book group. I didn't think it sounded all that interesting. And I was wrong. It was fascinating. It gets into all this fascinating information about how valuable certain feathers are. Like, who would have thought? And how this guy tried to get away with, as he says in the subtitle, the natural history heist of the century by stealing a bunch of priceless feathers from a museum in London, I think. It was excellent. My favorite memoir of that year, of 2020, was No Time Like the Future, An Optimist Considers Mortality by Michael J. Fox. This was the other one I mentioned. Again, outstanding on audio. I can remember listening to this while I was walking in my neighborhood, tears in my eyes, laughing out loud. My neighbors think I'm crazy anyway, don't worry. But just all of his memoirs are so good and especially outstanding on audio. In 2021, I just outright declared a tie. I could not choose between these two outstanding books for my favorite novel of the year. And these were The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne and A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I've talked about both of these on my channel. I think everyone knows about A Gentleman in Moscow, about a man during the Russian Revolution who was put under house arrest in this fancy luxury hotel, like for the rest of his life. And the life that he makes, it is, oh man, I tagged so many lines in that book to write into my quote journal. I laughed out loud. I cried. It is just outstanding. And similarly, The Heart's Invisible Furies is one of my all-time favorite books. Historical / contemporary fiction, because the structure of it is a man looking back on his life and telling you his story from childhood through the present. And the novel, again, heartwarming, heartbreaking, made me tear up, made me laugh out loud. And I like my tragedy with a dose of humor. And that's what this had. Just a fabulous, fabulous book. My favorite nonfiction in 2021 was The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Kolbert. This is another book that not just every American, that everyone in the world needs to read. It was fascinating, horrifying, eye-opening. It's about how the Earth has gone through 5 distinct extinction periods. and that we are in the midst of a sixth. And in each chapter, she goes over a different species that is becoming extinct right now under our noses. I am really into the outdoors and nature, and this was all new to me. It's just fascinating. Plus, for each chapter, for each species that she was investigating, she traveled to the region where it's in trouble. So it's a travel log, it's a memoir, it is fascinating, like earth science, just an outstanding book. I read it for book group and we had such a good discussion on it. Definitely something everyone should read. Okay, we're getting close to the present day, 2022. My best book of the year was one I talk about very often on my channel, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. One of my favorite books of all time. We were just talking about it in my book group yesterday because one of our members brought it. She said she had just finished it. Did anyone want to borrow it? And a lot of people were like, oh, it's science fiction. No. And I stood up and gave a presentation about it. I was like, if you don't like the science, skip over those parts. Just skim those parts. You have to read this book. It is such a heartwarming, hilarious, moving novel. And as I told them, you can't describe much about it without giving things away. And it is best experienced cold. All I will tell you is that on the first page, a school teacher wakes up on a spaceship and the only other two people on the ship are dead. So they were all three were in stasis, and he wakes up. And he has no memory of how he got there, why he's there, what he's meant to do. He knows he's a middle school or high school science teacher. He doesn't know how he came to this place. That's the opening. It is propulsive. It is a gripping story. My husband read it first, and then while I was we were on vacation, well, actually driving to Oklahoma for his dad's funeral, but on a long road trip. So we were in a hotel together, and as I was reading it at night, and I would gasp or laugh or have some other big reaction, and he'd be like, oh, what part are you reading now? What part are you reading now? You have to read this book. Again, if you're not into the science-y parts, skim those. It's worth it. And there's a movie coming out, so you have to read the book before you see the movie. Still, one of my top books. My favorite nonfiction in 2022 was The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton. Oh, another book that definitely every American should read. It is a memoir by an innocent man who was on death row for more than 20 years for a crime he didn't commit. The horrible mess-ups that got him in there, and by mess-ups, and I'm using the polite term, I mean with the police, with the lawyers, with the whole judicial system that got him imprisoned in the first place and on death row. But also everything it took to finally prove his innocence and get him released. And the title were his first words as he walked out of the prison where he'd been for decades and saw the sun. It's moving, it's angering, it's eye-opening. Again, something especially everyone in America should read. In 2023, instead of declaring a tie, I had two favorite novels that year, so I put one as favorite novel and one as favorite audio. But really, the favorite audio was absolutely favorite novel of the year. And that was Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. No surprise. Absolutely loved it. But it deserved its place under favorite audio because it is so amazing on audio. The narrator just fully embodies the main character, becomes him, and brings you along. Outstanding. It's set in Appalachia in the 90s. It deals with some very difficult topics, but there is so much humor in this book right from page 1. And the narrator's way of describing things is hilarious. So again, I like my tragedy with a dose of humor, and Demon Copperhead brings that in spades. Another one most of you probably know about. It's about an epic road trip, and I love road trips. Set in the 1950s, I believe. Yeah, beginning in 1954. It's set in, I think, 10 days in 1954 as this sort of ragtag group makes their way across the country. Outstanding. Complex. Lots of complex emotions in it, but again, really funny. And my favorite nonfiction in 2023 was The Zookeeper's Wife by Diane Ackerman. It's the story of what the zookeeper and his wife in Warsaw, Poland did during World War II as the Nazis came in and not only took over the city, but took over parts of their zoo. And how the amazing things they did, not just to help animals, but to help people. This is an incredible story. And finally, 2024. Last year, my favorite book of the year was Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. And believe me, it was as shocking to me as it might be to you. I didn't think I liked Westerns. This book blew me away. It has so much emotional depth. Well-drawn female characters as well as male. It's gripping and a very compelling story. Talk about a ragtag group as this group makes their way from Texas all the way to Montana in the 1800s. He won the Pulitzer for this. It's got romance, adventure, a fair amount of violence because that was just the rule of the day. It's got a sense of humor. You know how I feel about that. Just all around outstanding novel. As soon as I finished it, my husband read it. We both read its sequel, Streets of Laredo, this year and loved that as well. And my favorite nonfiction last year was Leave Only Footprints by Connor Knighton. Okay, I knew I still had this book. I loved it. I knew I didn't get rid of it. It was over in our family room with a stack of books because there are quotes in it that I want to write down. Yes, I read it a year ago, more than a year ago now. So the subtitle on this is My Acadia to Zion Journey Through Every National Park. So if you've been to my channel before, you know we love to travel, we love national parks, we love the outdoors. This book is written by a correspondent for CBS Sunday Morning, and so it's very well written. And he took a year off and visited every single national park. He did little videos for CBS either Saturday or Sunday morning, I don't remember which show at the time, that you can still find on YouTube that are great, but the book is fabulous and it does have full color photos in it. What he does is it's not like a boring rundown of what's in each park. He picks one particular thing to focus on in each park about what makes it unique. It's everything from sunrise to sound to volcanoes, ice, people. It's just an outstanding book. Definitely recommend that. And who knows well, I have some idea already, but what my favorites of 2025 will be. So how about you? Please let me know in the comments below. Do you have any favorite books from the last 15 years or so that stand out in your mind, that still when you think of them, and you think of them often, you know they're your favorites. Please let me know in the comments down below. Maybe one of those will be my next favorite book.